I never thought my husband's late nights at work hid a secret life that would destroy everything we built. Part 1. The Quiet Cracks. I always believed my marriage was a quiet, steady thing, not perfect, but solid enough to weather the storms life threw at us. Tom was a hard worker, the kind of man who didn't say much but showed he cared by making sure the bills were paid, the house was kept in order, and dinner was on the table. We had our routines, our small jokes, and a life that felt comfortable. But comfort can breed complacency, and complacency can blind you to the cracks forming right under your feet. At first, it was just the late nights at the office. Nothing unusual. We both worked demanding jobs. But then the calls started coming at odd hours, whispered conversations when I entered the room, and a sudden increase in weekends spent catching up on projects. I tried to tell myself it was all part of the grind, that Tom was just under pressure. I wanted to believe in him. I needed to. One evening, after a long day, I noticed a message pop up on his phone, a quick smiley face and a text that said, "Can't wait to see you again." My heart skipped, confusion swirling inside me. When I asked, Tom brushed it off, claiming it was just a work friend. But the unease settled in my chest like a stone. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us grew louder than any argument. I found myself watching him more closely, piecing together the little inconsistencies. A perfume scent that wasn't mine, a lipstick stain on his collar, a text message he hastily hid when I came into the room. I wanted to confront him, scream and demand the truth, but fear held me back. Fear of shattering what little stability we had left, fear of admitting that the man I loved was slipping away from me, right under my nose. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion itself. It was the loneliness that came with it. Feeling invisible in my own home, replaced by a shadow of a man who was no longer mine to hold. I grieved quietly for a marriage that was unraveling piece by piece. One night I found the proof, a hidden social media account under a fake name, messages filled with promises and longing, things that were never meant for me. The betrayal wasn't loud or explosive. It was cold, calculated, and suffocating. That night I lay awake wondering how I'd missed the signs for so long, how someone I trusted with my whole heart could live a double life without me noticing until it was almost too late. But that was just the beginning. The road ahead would test everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and forgiveness. Part 2. Facing the truth. The moment I discovered Tom's secret was like a punch to the gut, but it also broke the barrier of denial I had built around myself. I could no longer pretend. I had to face the truth, raw and painful as it was. The following days felt like walking through a fog. Every glance at Tom was charged with suspicion. Every word he spoke felt like a lie. I wanted answers, demanded them, but he dodged my questions, offering vague excuses and broken promises. "How long has this been going on?" I finally asked one evening, my voice trembling. Tom looked away, silent for a moment, then whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." That admission shattered something inside me. The man I married, the man I trusted, was now a stranger who had chosen someone else over me. I kept replaying moments in my head, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the way he seemed distracted even when we were together. Had I been so blind, or was I just too afraid to see? My friends told me to leave, to walk away and never look back. But love isn't that simple. I was torn between heartbreak and hope, between pain and the desperate desire to salvage what we had. The hardest part was the silence between us, the heavy, suffocating silence filled with unspoken guilt and anger. We shared a home, but we no longer shared a life. I sought solace in journaling, pouring out my feelings onto paper, trying to make sense of the chaos. I realized I needed to find strength not just for myself, but for my own dignity and future. But confronting Tom was only the start. I had to confront myself, my doubts, my fears, and my own worth. Was I enough? Was this betrayal a reflection of my failures? The questions haunted me, but I refused to let them define me. This journey was no longer just about Tom's betrayal. It was about reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my power. And so, I began to plan. Not revenge, not confrontation, but survival. A way to rise from the ruins of my broken trust and build a new life, with or without him. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would no longer be silent. Part 3. Picking up the pieces. In the days that followed, I felt like I was living in two worlds, one where the betrayal had already happened, and one where I was desperately trying to hold on to the life I thought we had. But deep down, I knew that life was gone. I started to distance myself from Tom, creating space where our conversations were no longer about plans and dreams, but about logistics and cold exchanges. The warmth was gone, replaced by a bitter chill. Friends and family noticed the change. Some offered support, others judgment. It was exhausting navigating the sea of opinions while I was already drowning in my own thoughts. One night, I sat alone in the dark, clutching the photo album from our wedding. I traced our smiles, trying to remember when everything started to fall apart. Was there a sign I missed? A moment where I should have acted? I realized the pain wasn't just about Tom's infidelity. It was about the loss of trust, the loss of the future I had imagined, and the loss of myself in the process. But amidst the pain, I found a spark, a small, flickering hope. I began therapy, slowly untangling my emotions and learning to rebuild my self-worth. Each session was a battle, but also a step forward. I also started focusing on myself, rediscovering passions I had shelved, reconnecting with old friends, and setting boundaries I hadn't dared to before. The hardest moments were when Tom tried to reach out. Apologies, promises, tears. I had to steel myself, reminding that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and healing doesn't mean returning to brokenness. As I reclaimed my voice, I realized that betrayal is a wound, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. I was learning to trust myself again, to trust my instincts, and to know that my worth isn't defined by someone else's choices. This chapter of my life was far from over, but for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of peace. The silence was no longer a prison. It was the quiet before my own rebirth. Part 4. The crossroads weeks turned into months, and the weight of betrayal slowly loosened its grip. Yet, the question that haunted me was clear. What now? Could I ever trust Tom again? Could I forgive him, or even forgive myself for what felt like a failure? Tom and I sat across from each other one evening, the silence thick with things unsaid. He looked tired, not just physically, but as if his soul carried the burden of his mistakes. I was tired too, but determined. I don't know if I can ever go back to what we had, I said quietly. But I want to try if you're willing to fight for us honestly. His eyes met mine, glistening with regret. I'll do anything to fix this. I was wrong. I was selfish. I love you. Words can be easy to say, but hard to live up to. Trust is fragile, like glass. Once broken, it can only be mended with care, patience, and time. We started counseling together. The sessions were raw. We peeled back layers of resentment, pain, and confusion. Sometimes we clashed. Sometimes we cried. But every conversation, no matter how painful, chipped away at the walls between us. Rebuilding wasn't just about us. It was about me reclaiming my strength, my voice, my identity, beyond the label of the betrayed wife. I took solo trips, reconnected with my passions for painting and writing, and learned to find joy in solitude. Friends who had drifted away returned, drawn by the courage I showed in facing the truth instead of burying it. Slowly, a new foundation was laid, not built on naive trust, but on honesty and renewed respect. Still, shadows lingered. The fear of being hurt again whispered in the quiet moments. But I reminded myself, healing is not linear. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful, but it's worth fighting for. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset from our porch, Tom took my hand and said, "Thank you for giving us a chance." I squeezed his hand gently, knowing that while the past couldn't be erased, the future was still ours to write. Part 5. New Beginnings. Months passed, and the scars of betrayal slowly faded into lessons learned. The road was never smooth. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when the pain threatened to overwhelm me. But through it all, I grew stronger. Tom and I weren't the same couple we used to be. We had been tested in ways no marriage should endure, and while some bonds broke beyond repair, ours was healing. Not by forgetting the past, but by facing it together, with openness and vulnerability. I learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing betrayal. It's about freeing myself from the chains of anger and bitterness. It was about reclaiming my peace. One quiet morning, as sunlight spilled into our kitchen, I realized I was smiling genuinely again. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had found myself amidst the ruins. I started setting boundaries, not just with Tom, but with the life I wanted to lead. I chose honesty over silence, courage over fear, and self-love over despair. Betrayal had threatened to drown me, but instead, it became the crucible that forged a new me. If you are walking through the pain of being betrayed, know this. Your worth is not defined by someone else's choices. Healing is possible. Strength is within you. And sometimes the darkest storms lead us to the brightest dawns.